I literally saw people jumping on the pieces of the airplane to get them to align. I call it the Tarzan effect, among other improper methods. Again, I raised concerns internally. I was sidelined. I was told to shut up. I received physical threats. My boss said, I would have killed someone who said what you said in a meeting. And then this is not a safety culture when you get threatened by bringing issues of safety concerns.
Our purpose today is to hear from whistleblowers who have personal, eyewitness, factual stories to tell about Boeing putting profits ahead of safety, putting stock price ahead of quality, production speed ahead of responsibility. This story is serious, even shocking. The kinds of evidence that we will hear today is fact-based, science-based testimony that the public deserves to hear. And it is part of a continuing series of hearings that we will have based on what these whistleblowers will tell us and evidence that we obtain from documents from a variety of sources. There are mounting serious allegations that Boeing has a broken safety culture and a set of practices that are unacceptable. These whistleblowers have come forward at great personal risk. In fact, a number of them and others have suffered harassment, isolation, transfers, and even threats of physical violence. Just as an example, this tire was in a car that belonged to Mr. Salehpour. He will testify about the circumstances that led to, in effect, a bolt being driven into a tire in his car, which posed not only a symbolic message to him, but also a personal risk to his safety. It is simply one example of retaliation and reprisals and threats that he endured. In the wake of the 737 MAX crashes, many current and former Boeing and FAA officials, like Ed Pierson and Joe Jacobson, both of whom are with us today, came forward to raise those kinds of concern about safety culture at Boeing. And tragically, last month, John Barnett, a former Boeing quality control manager in South Carolina, who became a whistleblower, committed suicide after alleging that managers had been pressuring workers not to document defects and properly address safety risks. Since this hearing was announced, our subcommittee has received outreach from other individuals affiliated with Boeing who have contacted us to voice their concerns. For example, a former Boeing South Carolina manager wrote to us with examples of what he described as, quote, culture of shortcuts, pressure, and hostility that he experienced while working at Boeing between 2009 and 2020. Another Boeing mechanic who asked to remain anonymous wrote to us and said, quote, the Boeing South Carolina plant was run by a good old boy network that played by their own rules. When we raised concerns that the work was not in accordance with the process and procedures, we were ordered to just do it and told there were hundreds of others waiting in line outside the gate wanting our jobs.
Chairman Blumenthal and Ranking Member Johnson and the honorable members of this subcommittee, thank you for convening this hearing. My name is Sam Salehpour, and I'm a quality engineer at the Boeing. I have over 40 years of experience as an engineer. I'm not here today because I want to be here. I'm here today because I felt that I must come forward because I do not want to see another 787. I do not want to see 787 or 777 crash. I have serious concerns about the safety of the 787 and 777 aircraft, and I'm willing to take on professional risk to talk about them. First, little bit about me. I came to the United States in 1973 and got a mechanical engineering degree from University of Missouri, where Senator Hawley is from. After that, I worked for companies that they were involved in the space shuttle. I had a friend, engineer, that worked on the space shuttle. He was always complaining about the quality of the O-rings that we had in the space shuttle Solur boosters. He was scared that they might fail. He raised his concerns, and he was heard, and he wasn't heard, and 7 brave astronauts, including the teacher in space, died when the Challenger O-rings ultimately failed, just as he predicted. At the moment, I know that if I were ever in a similar situation, I would have to come up and speak up. I have analyzed Boeing's own data to conclude that the company is taking manufacturing shortcuts on the 787 program that may significantly reduce the airplane safety and the life cycle. Since 2013, there have been serious issues on the 787 program, not properly closing thousands of gaps in its assembly of the fuselage on major joints. Boeing's standard says that these gaps must be closed, usually by a small shim or filler called a shim when they exceed 5 thousandths of an inch. This seems very small. Boeing's PR team like to call it the width of a human hair when you are operating at 35,000 feet. Details are that the size of a human hair can be a matter of life and death. In a rush to address its bottlenecks in production, Boeing hit problems, pushing pieces together with excessive force to make them appear that the gaps don't exist, even though they exist. The gap didn't actually go away, and this may result in premature fatigue failure. Effectively, they are putting out defective airplanes. I repeatedly produced reports for my supervisors and Boeing management demonstrating that the gaps in the 787 not being properly measured or shimmed in 2 major joints of the 787. Evaluating from the 29 inspected airplane data, I found gaps exceeding the specification that were not properly addressed 98.7% of the time. I want to repeat that. 98.7% of the time, the gaps that they were supposed to be shimmed, they were not shimmed. The other issue that I found, when you have these gaps and you drill through them, you get some debris in the stack-ups. This is known to be a problem, not a good thing for the airplanes by Boeing. But Boeing data also, from the inspection of the data, shows that the debris ended up in the gaps 80% of the time. Again, you have debris in the gaps 80% of the time. I want to make clear that I have raised these issues over 3 years. I was ignored. I was told not to create delays. I was told, frankly, to shut up. At one point, Boeing management got sick of me and raising these issues and moved me out of the 787 program into the 777 program. On the 777 program, I found problems. Again, I found that Boeing started a new process to build the airplane without taking into the consideration of the design of the airplane and how the airplane was designed. As a result, I witnessed severe misalignment when the planes were assembled. Boeing manufacturing used unmeasured and unlimited amount of force to correct the misalignment. And this also weakens the airplane in the long run. I literally saw people jumping on the pieces of the airplane to get them to align. I call it the Tarzan effect, among other improper methods. Again, I raised concerns internally. I was sidelined. I was told to shut up. I received physical threats. My boss said, I would have killed someone who said what you said in a meeting. And then this is not a safety culture when you get threatened by bringing issues of safety concerns. I hope that your work on this issue signals to Boeing that they must make real changes and get back to building the airplane safely. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
Since the first Boeing MAX airplane crash, I've spent every day thinking about the victims, their families, and the millions of people that fly Boeing airplanes. I've done everything I can to continue telling the world the MAX airplane is still unsafe and to alert authorities to Boeing's dangerous manufacturing. I'm here today to share 4 key messages. First, the manufacturing conditions that led to the 2 737 MAX disasters also led to the Alaskan blowout accident, and these conditions continue. In 2019, I testified as a Boeing whistleblower. I had previously warned the 737 general manager before the MAX crash to shut down the factory. I also warned Boeing's general counsels, the CEO, and the board of directors before the second crash to shut it down. They ignored my warnings. During my 2019 testimony, I described the chaotic manufacturing, the dysfunctional safety culture, and the horrible job government authorities were doing investigating the 2 crashes. The world is shocked to learn about Boeing's current production quality issues. I'm not surprised because nothing changed after the 2 crashes. There was no accountability. Not a single person from Boeing went to jail. Hundreds of people died, and there's been no justice. Unless action is taken and leaders are held accountable, every person stepping aboard a Boeing airplane is at risk. Government authorities ignored Boeing's manufacturing problems until the Alaska accident. Passengers shouldn't have to rely on whistleblowers to provide the truth. They should be able to get on airplanes and not have to worry about what model it is, whether it was designed and manufactured to the highest of standards, whether the airline is operating and maintaining it properly, or whether government agencies are providing proper oversight. The FAA could have prevented an ever-increasing list of production quality defects. Instead, they're surprised each time it occurs, showing how ineffective and reactive their oversight has become. Just last month, the FAA reported on uncommanded rolls of MAX airplanes due to wiring that is being chafed. Boeing and the FAA have known about these manufacturing defects for more than 2 years and did not inform the public about this potentially catastrophic condition. There are also Canadian reports of new MAX airplanes with chafed wire bundles containing burn marks and evidence of electrical arcing. Boeing routinely states that their airplanes meet or exceed all safety standards. This is untrue and misrepresents the safety of the airplanes. The company illegally removed thousands of quality control inspections on individual airplanes without the FAA's knowledge and without the knowledge of the airlines. Although many of these inspections have been reinstated, hundreds of airplanes have left Boeing factories without those thousands of inspections. My last point is the Department of Justice and FBI relied on the slanted results of the first MAX accident investigation to develop an illegal and unjust deferred prosecution agreement. The NTSB chair reiterated to Congress last week that Boeing has said there are no records documenting the removal of the Alaska Airlines door. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is a criminal cover-up. Records do, in fact, exist. I know this because I've personally passed them to the FBI. A 5-minute testimony is not nearly enough time to explain how insidious this story is. Boeing's corporate leaders continue to conceal the truth. They continue to mislead and deceive the public about the safety of the planes. That is the safety culture at the top of the Boeing company right now. The good news is the employees of Boeing and these agencies can overcome poor leadership. We need them to be successful. They're highly capable. They need to be supported and encouraged. And these problems are fixable, but it starts with telling the truth.
Professor Pruchnicki, what keeps ringing in my ears is that phrase, 100% about money. My understanding about what happened here is that Boeing sought to produce more airplanes more quickly without the necessary testing, inspections, and then sought to conceal and cover up what it knew was happening. Is that aligned with your view of the facts here?
Absolutely. That in fact is part of it because those things are expensive. And there's more to it. There's other things that go into that process. One of the biggest is the inspectors. Cutting back and getting rid of your inspector staff that looks at all the parts to make sure that these things are assembled correctly. We saw this with the accident, with the Alaska accident.
One of the lessons here is that shortchanging safety with shortcuts is short-sighted. I want to ask Mr. Salehpour, for many of us who may not understand the technology or the mechanics here, my understanding of your testimony is that Boeing, in effect, fastened parts of the fuselage together using force rather than proper shimming, and thereby created a severe risk that use over time and fatigue of the parts and fasteners would create risks to safety. Is that roughly correct?
Yes, sir. I think they are using significant excessive force to squash the gaps before you measure it. If you squash in the gap before you measure it, you don't know what you're getting, because the purpose of that is to measure the gap in its free state. When you squash that with excessive force, basically you're getting false information. If you get the gap measured falsely, you are not going to shim it properly, and it's a danger to the airplane. It's very, very important. Boeing has put out reports that they say that they can lose almost 80% of the airplane life cycle if we don't follow these protocols, which it is the proper shimming, measuring the gap,
One remedy
Yeah.
or one precaution would be proper testing. Has Boeing ever shown you conclusive testing results that would dispel your concerns?
No, sir. First of all, the testing that we're talking about, I have never seen it, any of the information. The second is the airplane is the king. The numbers that you get from the actual airplanes, regardless of what the testing done, that should be considered. And my data that I was using in my assessment is from the 29 airplane that it was inspected.
Mr. Pierson and Mr. Jacobson, you have very extensive experience with Boeing as well as air safety. Do the allegations that Mr. Salehpour has brought to our attention surprise you in light of your experience?
Well, I just want to say that I can't obviously technically, say that what he's saying is absolutely right. I just don't know that. But I will say that the problem that he's describing, where he's trying to get information and he's basically being told, basically shut up, don't worry about it. And, he's obviously making an effort, a long effort, to try to get to the truth. And what should happen is somebody should say, here's the data, here's the information. He shouldn't have to wait until becoming a whistleblower to get that information.
Mr. Jacobson, you worked at the FAA for quite a while. Mr. Pierson and as well Mr. Salehpour have been critical, as many of us have been, of the FAA. In fact, Mr. Pierson has brought to the attention of federal authorities information about the potential failings of those investigative steps by federal agencies. Do you think just assigning more inspectors to Boeing from the FAA is a sufficient solution?
Well, certainly having more inspectors is helpful in certain circumstances. I think in the Renton factory, having more inspectors, more of an on-site presence is very important. But the attitude needs to change. The attitude right now is Boeing dictates to the FAA, tells the FAA what they will do, what they will accept, and that needs to change. The FAA needs to be a regulator. They need to do their job, and that's the missing piece right now.
Would it be fair to say that the FAA has been too captive to Boeing?
They absolutely have been too captive to Boeing, and that is one of the big problems that I've seen. Even when we were trying to recertify the 737 MAX, Boeing would try and focus the attention on certain things like MCAS to the exclusion of other parts of the airplane or the design or the manufacturing that needed to be investigated, and Boeing and the FAA went along with that at high levels. They went along with that, the redirect from the Boeing company.
Mr. Salehpour, I showed you earlier a photograph of a tire wheel from your car. That bolt was inserted by someone as a threat, perhaps as a risk to you.
Yes, I was losing just air on my tire, and I bring it somewhere, and they say, hey, you have a nail in the tire. That's about 1 month old tire. So I brought it back to the shop that they fixed it, and they fixed it. I went to pick it up, and the gentleman told me that, this nail was not picked up through normal driving. I didn't know anything about that. He's the one who brought it to my attention. And I came home, and I had to go all the way back there to get the tire, to just save the tire. It was like 25-mile drive. But anyway, but the bottom line is that, yes, the nail was inserted in there. I believe it happened at work. I have no proof of that.
You mentioned also a threat to your physical safety, someone saying they would
Yes,
have killed you if they
someone
heard.
told me they would have killed someone like me if you said something, what you said, so.
The FAA issued an absolutely scathing report about Boeing, and Boeing has said that it's developing an action plan. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Pierson, should we rely on Boeing to, in effect, develop its own action plan, evaluate itself, and go on about its business? Or do we need continuing investigation?
We absolutely need continuing investigation. And honestly, I'm so tired of hearing about plans. We need action. And you can plan all day long, but if you don't actually carry through with it, it doesn't matter.
You'd like to see action.
Yes, sir.
I think that's one of the common themes here. We need action, not just more talk.